Our next guest is 26 years of age, but already has nearly 15 years' experience in creating incredibly popular websites. He's built his own 18-website online empire and is considered a world-leading expert in what makes things go viral on the internet. Emerson Spartz is the chief executive of Spartz Inc., a publishing group that, between its sites, pulls in 160 million page views a month. The websites include one for strange facts, one for uplifting stories, and another for funny smartphone autocorrect mistakes. Pieces of information that may seem trivial in and of themselves, but which have the power to pique the interests of and to get shared by tens or hundreds of thousands of internet users. The recipe for how to go viral is one that marketers the world over want to tap into and harness as they try to best use the net to promote their products to the widest possible audience. Emerson Spartz started out online at age 12, creating the website MuggleNet, one of the internet's most popular and visited Harry Potter fan sites. It took him to a spot on the New York Times bestseller list while he was still a teenager, as well as a flight to Scotland for a one-on-one interview with the usually media-shy J.K. Rowling. Emerson Spartz is in Chicago, from where he and his wife Gabby run their company. Emerson, great to talk to you. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
The obvious question was, who were you at 12 to get involved in making such a major and successful website? What had been your own background online up until that point?
Close to zero. When I was 12, I convinced my parents to let me drop out of school and start homeschooling myself. And they pretty much stayed out of my way and they let me study whatever I wanted. And I came across a free webpage maker and I thought it'd be fun to make a website. I'd also just read the third Harry Potter book and I was completely obsessed. So I decided that I wanted to make the best Harry Potter website in the world and I had the free time to do it.
Simple as that. You've got the time, you've got the interest in Harry Potter, you've got the mechanics of how to build a site. The next thing is, how does it become one of the most popular such sites in the world?
I spent a lot of time studying what makes ideas spread. In other words, what makes things go viral. And I saw patterns and I was able to, there was a few strategies I was able to employ to get a lot of users quickly and build a great product.
This is where we need to just pause a moment and come back to that first question. What kind of a person were you at 12? First, how do you persuade your parents that your education and you are better served by dropping out of school? What was going on?
I was a intensely curious child, and it was born out of I've always been a passionate learner, but the school system wasn't doing it. I was the kind of kid who in reading class we'd supposed to read a chapter a week, and I would read the entire book, and then I'd just sit there twiddling my thumbs, being bored. So my parents weren't taking a huge risk on me.
But between you, decided that the homeschooling would work. Not only that, you were pretty much able to set your own curriculum or customize your own curriculum.
Right, because my parents, in all their wisdom, understood that motivation begets learning. Like you only really learn something if you're motivated to learn it. And I was motivated to learn many things, and so I think they thought it was worth taking a risk and seeing what kinds of things I would choose to learn. And it seems like it turned out pretty well.
The reading was a big part of this. You were a massive and a very fast reader. And within this homeschooling environment, how many books would you read? What kinds of books?
So when I was homeschooled, one thing my parents did, which was really smart, is they had me read 4 short biographies of successful people every single day. And this just shattered my little 12-year-old mind, and I started to think really big at a really young age. And I remember having this epiphany when I thought to myself, if I can do all this, and I'm only 12, imagine what I can do when I'm 17. And it felt like an impossibly old age, and I decided that I wanted to change the world, and I wanted to do it on a massive scale. So I began immersing myself into the lives of people who had already changed the world, to see what patterns I could extract from their experiences. And in doing this research, one conclusion I came to very quickly is that people who change the world tend to be extraordinarily influential. And there was one particular type of influence that really captured my imagination, and that was virality. Because to me, understanding why things go viral felt like the closest that we could get to having a human superpower. If you can make things go viral, you could tip elections, you could overthrow dictators, you could start movements, you could revolutionize industries. So as far as reading goes, I set a goal of reading one nonfiction book every single day. Business, politics, psychology, economics, technology, science. I wanted to be able to connect dots and see patterns between different disciplines and industries. And it was that broad-based approach to education that led to my big aha moment with virality. So,
because did we even know what it was? This would have been, 14 years ago, so around 2000. But so virality was, or the idea of something going viral on the internet was already a kind of known thing.
I didn't start studying virality specifically until years after that. My homeschool curriculum began when I was 12, but the reading one book every single day, that didn't start until college.
Okay.
I was probably at about a half a book a day before that.
Just as an aside, what kind of a reader are you? Are you a speed reader who just selects the relevant bits, or are you just have a tremendous stamina? How would you describe your reading patterns?
It's a combination of both. I taught myself how to speed read, and I absolutely do read efficiently. And that means a big part of speed reading is just knowing what you should read and what you shouldn't read. We were taught how to read poorly. We were taught that every single word is treated equally, and you open up a book and you start at the first word and then you go all the way to the last word and you treat every one of them evenly. But that's not true. And there's some information that's really important to read and other information that's not as important to read. And you'll get a lot more value out of your reading time if you actually stop to think about what's important. This is, of course, for nonfiction, not for fiction.
Come back to it. Fiction should be enjoyed and savoured, right?
That's right.
Come back to Harry Potter, because it did go viral in its own way. It went viral hard copy. And at the time that you were a fan of the books, had that happened, or were you right on the cusp of that happening?
It had already started, but it became much larger. I didn't get into it until the third Harry Potter book had been released. It already felt like it was very late when I started. Of course, seeing how much bigger Harry Potter got after that point, it seems very early to most people.
And also early in this idea of online fandom. I mean, these days, musicians, books, films, entire brands are built around the idea of using or translating something that might be quite old, like Doctor Who, say, or the Marvel movies, moving that online and creating an entire product. At the time you were starting, it was beginning to happen, wasn't it? Certainly fans engaging online, but you were right at the cusp of that.
That's right, because before the internet, if you were a big fan of a fiction series, the only way that you could interact with other fans was through perhaps local fan clubs, which weren't terribly popular. So the other way of saying it is that if you were a big Harry Potter fan and there was no internet, you wouldn't talk to anybody about Harry Potter except maybe your best friend and his friend. But the internet gives us the ability to all unleash our inner nerd, and we can geek out about things with thousands of other people who share our passions.
What you built, though, was a very sophisticated model of engagement. You ended up with a staff of more than 100 volunteers. How did you go about building the site almost deliberately in a way that would give it widest possible engagement?
Well, ultimately, the goal was to build the ultimate Harry Potter website. And there was three things that I did that really helped the website to take off. The first one was applying basic management science to what was otherwise a very primitive fandom. So I started adding content to the site, and I realized that there was passionate people who were contributing things for me to put up on the site. And I realized that instead of trying to do it myself, I would probably be better off recruiting them to come help me. And so I started building a team when no one else was really building teams. So we were able to produce a lot more content. The second thing was that I needed to get people to come to the site, and I didn't know how to promote it. So I just went around and I asked every single Harry Potter website in the entire internet to link to me in exchange for a link to their site. So that was how I got the initial audience built. And then it was just something that, if you spend 10 hours a day working on just about anything, you'll probably have a pretty good product 10 years later.
You used other existing sites as a way of drawing in new users to you, and other sites that were associated with Harry Potter or had some kind of link to Harry Potter?
That's right, other Harry Potter fan sites.
Yeah. And you also had other sites as role models, things like the Simpsons site. Lord of the Rings was another I think you looked at.
That's right. I spent a lot of time studying other fan sites and looking at what they were doing that was better than what I was doing. And that was a constant source of inspiration. So I looked at, in the beginning, when I had just a small, crappy little Harry Potter site, I spent a lot of time looking at other Harry Potter sites and getting ideas for what I could do better. And then I started looking at other fandoms like Simpsons, Lord of the Rings, Dragon Ball Z, and they were more mature than the Harry Potter fandom. The sites were run by actual adults. So I got tons and tons of ideas for things that I could do better by studying the successful fan sites and other fandoms.
You had to keep the age quiet from some that you were looking at getting involved. Is that the case?
Yes, I kept my age a fiercely guarded secret at first, because I thought that if people knew that they were working for a kid, that they would all just leave en masse. And eventually, I came clean about my age.
And what happened when everyone realized?
It wasn't a terribly surprising thing. I think they all they didn't realize I was as young as I was, but they knew that I was much younger than they were and that I was probably just a very mature kid for my age.
There was podcasts also that you were running, and then also as your name became known, because millions of Harry Potter fans around the world were getting involved, you're writing books analysing the phenomenon, and this book makes it onto the New York Times bestseller list. You're going to conventions, you're going to premieres. I mean, how old were you by now?
It was something that happened over a period of years. There was no real start point to it all. Oh, how old am I now?
Yeah, well, no, how old were you by the time this thing just took off and all of a sudden you were writing books about the phenomenon and you were speaking on it, going to premieres? How long to get to that point?
It happened over years. There was no one real date that sticks out. The first thing that really stuck out as far as public recognition was the BBC released a list of the top Harry Potter websites. And the BBC, and this was not long after I had launched, and MuggleNet was number one on the list. And that was when my parents started to take it seriously.
And started to realise that maybe their call had been the right one, if they
Right.
hadn't already. Look, as a fan, it must have been fantastic to meet with J.K. Rowling, the author of the books. What was that experience like?
It was, so J.K. Rowling was planning on doing just a handful of interviews to celebrate the release of the sixth book. And I was chosen to represent the fandom. So it was a huge, huge honor. And it was just she is the coolest, most down-to-earth person. She has earned every bit of the respect and admiration that's been heaped upon her. And it was just a surreal experience.
Have you kept in touch with her?
Not closely.
Yeah. Of course, the active part of the Harry Potter phenomenon comes to an end at some point, and you're in your late teens by this point, the last of the books being released. And was there a decision to make at this time, really, about whether it was a one-off initiative, you would, close the book, so to speak, on the website and to move on from the internet? What were the decisions you made at that point?
I'd realized that my calling, I had played just about every sport competitively at some point growing up. But I realized with MuggleNet that my calling was, I loved starting businesses. And I knew at some point I would start another business. But the plan was that I would continue to do MuggleNet for as long as it was fun. And when it stopped becoming as fun, I would hand off the day-to-day operations to the rest of my team and begin to look at other things. And that's exactly what happened. Before I went off to school, my freshman year of college, I handed off the day-to-day operations to my team. And I stayed on in more of an executive role, but only involved in the high-level decisions.
How did you find college, by the way, having left the school system at a much younger age, not even really sort of done the high school system? How was it going back to some kind of organised educational structure like college?
Well, I had a really neat college experience. I went to college for fun, which is a strange reason to go to college because I didn't. It wasn't that I needed money or a great degree or anything like that. And I had a great time, but my curriculum had almost nothing to do with my formal curriculum because I at that point I was so used to teaching myself that I didn't see a lot of value in sitting in lecture halls and doing things the normal way.
So it was the social life that was the benefit.
Yes.
Now, the next shift then is you've made a viral website. Now you're focusing more on what makes websites go viral. And how did that... Was that information you gleaned along the way, or did it become a deliberate project at some point?
It was information I gleaned along the way, and it became a deliberate project when I began... So I had a goal of getting 10,000 hours of experience. And when I was doing my book a day, I started to get lots and lots of ideas, and I started to see things come together. So I had this aha moment. It was the kind of insight that if I was an academic, I would have started publishing papers on it, but I'm not an academic. I'm an entrepreneur, so I just started doing it right away. I used Facebook as my first petri dish and developed a series of algorithms designed to get Facebook pages to go viral, created dozens of pages that went from 0 to millions of fans over a period of a few hours to a few days. And what I was basically doing was I was testing hundreds of different variables and seeing which variables correlated positively to virality. And then I kept shortening the viral loop until I could tell within 20 seconds if a page was going to go viral. And then I started applying the same ideas to Twitter and got millions of followers on Twitter, YouTube, Tumblr, websites, apps. Ultimately, it worked on every platform. And these insights are what I decided to build a company around, and that's what we do now.
So it had been your own tweaking of Facebook pages initially and noticing a significant difference depending on what you did with a given variable that you then developed and got very deliberate about.
Well, I developed theories before I even started using Facebook. Facebook was just my petri dish to experiment with.
Okay. The concept of viral then is all beginning to emerge, and again you're at the forefront of it. How do you define it, by the way? What makes something truly viral when it comes to the internet?
Things ultimately, everyone has their own kind of different definition of virality. To me, something is viral when people share it with their friends. And things that go viral only go viral because they create enough emotion, lots of emotion, and the right kinds of emotions. There's certain things that we want to share with our friends, and there's other things that we don't want to share. So understanding why people share was just a fascinating endeavor to me, because it seemed like this incredible. If you understood why things go viral, you could help. There's so much that you could do to positively impact the world.
And it goes way beyond making money, right, or getting your product sold.
Right.
Revolutions of all kinds, potentially.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure everybody can relate to the experience of feeling like there's an idea that if you had the ability to get this idea out to 10 million people or 100 million people, it could change the world. And if you could do that for more than one idea, the amount of positive influence that you could create would be enormous. So, for example, this was actually the first website that we launched was a website called Gives Me Hope, where people could share uplifting and inspiring true personal stories. Stories of love, stories of friendship, stories of random acts of kindness. Think of chicken soup for the soul type stories that are about a paragraph long. And this website went massively viral back in 2009. And the website did so well that we received thousands of letters from people saying that the stories on the website kept them from dropping out of school, saved their marriage, even brought them back from the verge of suicide. And the website did so well that we ended up creating other sites like it, where people share their love stories, where people share their secrets. And those websites have received cumulatively over 500 million page views since we first started creating them. And some of the stories have been shared millions and millions of times. So the amount of positivity in the world that we're able to create by just creating this platform for people to share their positive stories and give hope to others is something that I found to be truly humbling and inspiring. I mean, there are a few things in life that can make you feel as proud as when you get a voicemail from a mother that you don't even know, and she's sobbing and thanking you, a complete stranger, for building a website that saved her daughter's life because her daughter was on the verge of suicide. And the website filled her with so much hope for the future that she decided not to carry through with it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you're using your extraordinary abilities and the analysis you've learned about what make things go viral for positive purposes. Of course, I suppose the inverse is possible too. It could be used for all kinds of propaganda or for nefarious purposes. Does it cut both ways? Absolutely.
And influence can always be used for good and for bad. But, I'm incredibly lucky. I got hit by the lucky stick in life. I had amazing friends, amazing family. I was given every opportunity to succeed. And I got to a point very early in life where I realized that I kind of had all my needs met. I didn't really need anything else to be happy. And it to me, the much more interesting challenge was, there's a lot of people most people are just struggling to get by, and they're not thinking necessarily, what is the biggest possible positive contribution I can make in the world, because they weren't, given the same opportunities I was given. So for me, the notion of being able to engineer virality of positive stories and improve people's lives is something that is just, it's truly exciting. It's like the highest mountain you could possibly climb.
What is quality virality? Is it the numbers? Is it the speed or the breadth of sharing? Which sites pick it up? What do you count as quality?
We'll look at the number of shares over a certain period of time is typically the way that you would measure how viral something actually was. Is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, if 1 million people look at it and nothing else happens, say, or 1 million people look at it, click on it, but don't take it in, it's a different matter, isn't it, from hitting the right target, say, or something that is very deeply absorbed.
Right. There's two parts to the funnel, if you will. The first part is awareness. You have to first expose people to a certain idea. The second, much harder part of that is to get them to take action based on the information that you were able to expose them to. But they're all part of the same understanding of human nature.
Everyone, marketers all over the world, brands, companies, political parties, want the ingredients of how to engineer a viral piece of content. There's a lot of money in it, there's a lot of power in it, figuring out why one piece of content gets 100 hits and another gets 1 million. Do you believe there is a fairly set recipe?
There is a recipe. It is not set as much as it's... there's only so much you could train somebody to do when it comes to creating virality. Part of it is intuition based off of having spent 6,000 hours studying the human mind, like neuroscience, cognitive psychology, behavioral science, etc. But part of it is certainly teachable. And my goal is to turn virality from art into a science. I think everything is an art until it becomes a science. Art is that which science has not yet explained. And virality right now is still very much an art.
It is, but you have quite a number of what might be called tips or tricks or certainly theories for generating more viral traffic. You have quite specific variables or factors that will help, yeah?
That's right. There are a number of things you can do to increase your probability of successfully engineering a viral event.
Such as?
So the first thing to keep in mind is that something only goes viral when it creates lots of emotion. Again, some emotions are better than others. For example, positive emotions tend to work much better than negative emotions. Uplifting, things that create a lot of excitement. You don't want to make people feel sad. Think about when you share something right now. You sit at your computer and you're clicking. To get you to share something requires you to feel so much emotion that you actually almost like sit up in your chair and you're motivated to go post this on Facebook. So this, this is why, sad things don't work very well. Things that make people angry can work very well. Injustice, that type of anger, you want to help the cause of some injustice, you're likely to share. Cute animals obviously work very well at creating the right kind of positive emotions. Nostalgic things create a lot of the right kinds of emotions. Humor also works very well for that reason too. Ultimately, before people are, let's say you're posting something on Facebook, before your friend shares it with their friends, they're asking themselves the question of, if I share this, will it make me look cool? You don't necessarily realize that you're asking yourself that question before you share it, but you are, because you're trying to promote a certain image to the world, and you want this thing that you're posting to make you look really good. This is the reason why nobody shares porn. It doesn't make you look very good. So those are a few things to keep in mind. But ultimately, the easiest thing, think of reality like this. If you want to make something go viral, the more that you study what's worked and things that have gone viral, the higher your probability of successfully getting it right is. So think of something like SARS. SARS was a Hong Kong phenomenon until it spread from Hong Kong, and then somebody got on a plane to Toronto, and it started to become an issue there, and so on. If you want to engineer the entire virus from scratch, it's very hard. But if you learn from things that have already gone viral, you have a much higher probability of success.
There are really specific things as well that you have tested over time. Odd-numbered lists go more viral than even-numbered lists.
That's right. There's a few things you can do that are, again, being very specific. So, for example, pictures on Facebook work very well. If you're going to post something, you want to get as many people to see it, make sure you attach a picture to it. That means you have to click the upload button and actually select a photo from your hard drive. If you do that, Facebook's algorithm loves photos, and it will show your photo to at least 50% more people than if you didn't. So that's a really simple thing you can do to get more virality on Facebook. You can tweet the same thing 3 times, 8 hours apart, and almost as many new people will see it the third time as the first time, because people are on Twitter on different time zones or on different behaviors. Using lists is very effective because lists are fun to read, and really big, long, boring articles that don't have very many paragraphs in them are not as fun, and people are more likely to read them, and people are more likely to click them too. Lists work very well. Headlines are so important. Most people have no idea how important the headline is for getting people to actually care enough to read the article, and then ultimately getting people, when they do share it, getting their friends to click it. So headlines that are, that grab you, that pull you in, that make you care about it. These are a few things that make a really big impact. The
old trick of making sure that the punchline isn't in the headline, does that still hold?
Well, sometimes it really depends. Ultimately, sites like Upworthy have shown that if you create a curiosity gap in people where you make them really curious to know what's on the other side of that link that they could click, it can work very well as well. Ultimately, just think about it. If you're writing a headline, would you click that headline? Or is there a way you can say that would make you more likely to click it? And if it makes you more likely to click it, it'll probably make other people more likely to click it as well.
Use arrows. It's just
That's right.
One of those random things you found.
On Twitter, if you add an arrow before a link, we've seen that it helps. So, for example, just a dash, and then a greater than symbol draws your eyes to it. And because it draws your eyes to it, it makes you more likely to read it. And if you're more likely to read it, you're obviously more likely to share it. Hence, more virality. We
were talking about clickbait just before. We were saying leave something out of the headline so that someone has a desire to go in, and many sites will take this approach. For those trying to achieve something, either earn money or get someone to sign up for something, though, does attracting clicks necessarily equate to greater ad revenue or a result that you're searching for? Can you put too much emphasis on just getting your site clicked on?
Of course, you have to look at the whole conversion funnel. The first thing is to get them into your front door, which is getting them to click on the link to get to your landing page where you're trying to sell them something, and then the second part of it is to get them to actually buy. And if your link says something about sexy hot women, and you're trying to sell a product for IT salesmen, then obviously your conversion rate is going to be pretty poor. So you have to look at both of those.
The other matter here is to accept that your idea is not unique, and I don't know whether this is a creative idea or an entrepreneurial idea or a joke. It's never going to be unique, and actually what you should do is look at what others have already done with something similar, yeah?
That's right. Most people are incredibly naive about what makes for a successful business. They look at $1 billion business and they think, wow, what a great idea. But it's ridiculous, because $1 billion business is not an idea. $1 billion business is a collection of thousands and thousands of ideas that thousands of employees have created that eventually make a machine that creates $1 billion in revenue. So don't get overly excited about one single idea, because for you to build a big company around it, or for that idea to become anything, it usually needs to have lots and lots of other ideas. For example, if you have an idea for a certain social networking site that you wanted to build, but ultimately there are 1,000 decisions that you have to make about the features you want to add, how you want to develop it, every part of the user experience, how you're going to market it, how you're going to promote it, who your customers are, how you're going to distribute it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, people get overly enamored by the idea of, first of all, by how important the idea is, and the second thing is that originality is that their idea is way more unique than it actually is. The reality is that every idea is exactly one idea, one like variable different than every other idea that's come before it, because that's how ideas evolve. Ideas cannot be more complex than that. It's just like evolution. When you look at evolution happens one genetic mutation at a time. Ideas happen one genetic mutation at a time as well. And ultimately, if you go start a business and you try to do something that no one else has done before and it has no resemblance to anything that's been done, ultimately you're much more likely to fail than if you learn from the best and you emulate businesses that have already worked, and then you give a unique spin to it that creates value in the marketplace, but isn't radically different from something that so many other people have done before. And usually, if you think you're doing something radically different than other people have done before, either it's not actually a very good business idea, or it is just you're just naive and you don't realize how many other businesses are actually doing things very similar to it.
Companies often throw money and other resources after things that are never going to go viral. I guess that's a common problem in other areas as well. I'm really interested in you talking about an art becoming a science in the case of virality. And you have come up with something which you would say is a viral coefficient. What is that?
The viral coefficient is a measure of virality. So, for example, if a picture goes viral, that means that the viral coefficient is more than 1. That means that on average, every person who sees it shares it with more than one other person. So if the viral coefficient is 1, exactly 1, then, and I tell you a joke and you tell someone else a joke and so on, then you'd have perfectly linear growth, like a flat upward sloping line. So this is just a way to measure how viral something really is.
Content is king, ultimately. However you measure its value, nothing's going to go viral if the content isn't good enough or doesn't have something about it to make it go.
That's exactly right. I keep coming back to this core idea about something that goes viral because it's really, really awesome. It creates a lot of emotion. Most of the stuff you see online is just not nearly good enough. It doesn't create nearly enough emotion in you to make you want to go and click that share button and spam all your friends on Facebook with it. And every once in a while, somebody gets it just right, and you're so motivated you're going to go share it with everyone you know.
When you say creates emotion, what would you give perhaps as 1 or 2 examples of someone getting that right?
So I just had someone, my wife actually just shared with me this gallery on Imager where this girl was telling a story about her uncle, and her uncle had been diagnosed with cancer, and she told his life story very concisely, but she had lots of pictures. She talked about the problems his family was facing financially and how he was never going to see his daughters grow up, and et cetera, et cetera. And she did such a masterful job of telling a story that created so much emotion that by the end of it, you were almost in tears and you couldn't wait to go donate some money to this family in need. And she was such a masterful storyteller that she created enough emotion that she's raised $65,000 so far from complete strangers on the internet. But somebody who wasn't as good of a storyteller would not have been able to raise nearly as much money because they wouldn't have known to add details like he's never going to see his daughters grow up. He's never going to see them off to the prom. He's never going to see them graduate from college, and all these little things that are true, but would be left out if all you said was he's dying and his family needs money. That doesn't create nearly as much emotion as adding in those kind of visceral, extremely vivid details about what this family is going through that helps you empathize with them even better.
What has changed, I guess, and I'm thinking of the political sphere now, because political advertising has certainly probably long understood some of these principles, certainly in your country. Is the difference now that these kinds of influencing tools are available to anyone and anyone with access to the internet?
So in my experience, the political sphere is still pretty backwards. They certainly understand some of these ideas, but their execution of these ideas is not terribly sophisticated. In my experience, the smartest people at understanding this and how to motivate people to action are actually coming out of the tech industry and Silicon Valley and so on.
So I was referring more to the way they might couch their ads, which is often, creating fear about a situation, or, this is going to harm you if my opponent is allowed to do this, or indeed I'm going to make your life perfect.
Right. And I think they actually do a real bad job of it, which is why it's so obvious that they're trying to manipulate you. Like the second you see an ad come on and it's got some really deep voice and it's got some ominous music playing in the background and it's all black and white with red text that slams on the screen and they start talking about how this guy's a bad guy, you think to yourself, well, I better ignore this because the people who created this obviously are super biased. Whereas if some of the smartest people I know of in the tech industry were trying to accomplish the same goal, they would be able to help you see things the way they would without necessarily hitting you over the head with it in a way that made you almost feel like you were gross and needed to take a shower. So
it's got to feel real, it's got to feel, or indeed perhaps even be, authentic.
Right. I mean, this is the reason why there's a lot of marketers who don't get this either. You listen to the radio and you hear somebody who sounds like they've been doing radio commercials their whole life and they're trying to sell you a product. I think that's going to be a lot less effective than having somebody with a real voice, sounds like your neighbor or your best friend saying the same thing. But that's just how the industry's done it for such a long time. It doesn't seem real, though. It doesn't seem organic, and so you don't feel like you can believe it.
What do you want to achieve now with the suite of companies that you have doing all sorts of things? What's the next big thing to which you want to turn your energies when it comes to this? Or is it more, as you say, on the other side of things, perhaps continuing to build a science, continuing to research and formulate a business science anyway around this?
Ultimately, both. We're continuing to refine our formula. We've got a methodology, a framework for being able to measure and predict virality, but it's still very crude right now compared to what it will be 6 months from now or a year from now. So we'll continue to launch mobile apps and websites, and we'll continue to grow our audience and build the business. But ultimately, the types of problems and challenges that we can attempt to solve are getting bigger and bigger. And that means they're getting more and more fun because ultimately, as I mentioned a few times before, I want to create the biggest possible positive impact in the world. And this knowledge that we're accumulating and this know-how is invaluable for getting us closer to being able to do that on the biggest scale possible.
Where would you direct that knowledge?
So the world's changing at an exponentially accelerating rate. And what that means is that the problems we're facing now are not necessarily the same problems that we're going to be facing in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because the tools are coming online that make it easier to solve problems we didn't even know we had. So if I was focused exclusively on impact right now, I mean, what motivates me the most is where you can create the biggest impact. And where you can create the biggest impact in general is in places that have the least amount of resources. So, whether it's going after, helping to solve tropical diseases that are negatively afflicting 300 million people in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia, or, whether you're talking about clean water or electricity or things like that. There's a lot of different problems, but ultimately my interest is on understanding how to make ideas go viral, because sometimes, every once in a while, there's an idea that comes along that's a simple idea. And if you could just get it to 100 million people, it could change the world. And there's not an obvious candidate for that right now, but those ideas, they come along, and when they do, I want to be ready.
Good talking to you. Thank you. Emerson Spartz, internet virality expert and top Harry Potter fan site creator.